four corners of the earth, we are preach God's word in various places. And from in the darkest night right to the daylight, we give praises. So we give praises. Now on everyday topics, well, you know we come for shine some light using godly principles. Yes, that's right. On the straight and the narrow path, that's where we go. Welcome to the DayeLight Show.
Welcome to the DayeLight Show with yours truly, Crystal Daye. And you remember the mission for the DayeLight Show? Shining light on everyday topics using biblical principles. This week, we have a very interesting conversation. Persons will say it's a little bit taboo, but I'm so grateful. I think this is probably one of the advantages of the whole COVID pandemic is that we are having more of this kind of conversation. And what we're talking about? Mental health. Yes. And I remember a few years ago, I did a podcast with Samuel. On my podcast, I interviewed with Samuel. And, I was actually got some knowledge about the difference between mental health and, mental illness, etc. And I felt like, again, the conversation today is how should the church deal with this mental health? Should we embrace it? There's also this talk about, there's nothing, mental health is all demonic and spiritual and everything is spiritual. Like, the conversations vary. But I have two women of God with me here that I believe that will really be able to shed some light, and they will be able to come from even a godly perspective, but a practical perspective for you to understand as a believer how to navigate this. And even if you're not a believer, it's very important that we balance the whole mental health and have this conversation. So with us today, I have Mrs. Sheryl Garriques Lloyd. If you hear the Garriques, if you know Crystal, she and Crystal related for real. But welcome to the DayeLight Show, Sheryl.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So Sheryl is a lecturer and she's also a mental health advocate. And, she will explain more because I'm still learning and understanding. But, we'll talk a little bit more about it. And of course, we have one of my favorite, Mrs. Chevonette James Henry. Welcome, Chevonette.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
She's author of many books.
Yes.
How many again? You reach?
8.
The author of many books. 8 books. She's a speaker. She is a wife. She's a mother. She's one of my top intercessors that I really, really appreciate. So I'm glad that you ladies are here. Plus, she has written a book about mental health that I really do believe that would be able to be beneficial to you. So with that being said, I want to start the conversation with Chevonette. Like, how did you get into wanting to have this conversation? You're a pastor wife, I know that you're also, a special needs advocate, working in that field. But how did you get into the whole conversation and, becoming this mental health expert?
Crystal, as I said, in my life daily, we see persons struggle both in and out of the classroom, in and out of the church. A couple of years ago, I met 4 youngsters who themselves were struggling with mental health. They had resorted to cutting themselves. So that way in deep waters when we get there. And when I met them and had this very honest conversation about why they would have gone to such a length, as to be cutting themselves, I realized that, look, this mental health thing is a real thing. And so I got involved in that, which would have triggered my book, Struggles of the Mind.
I love it. Now, I know we jump into the conversation, but Sheryl, as almost Dr. Sheryl, I want you to tell us. So we hear the term mental health, mental illness, mental wellness come up a lot. I love to hear, in your opinion, a definition or, how do we differentiate this?
All right. So it's not my opinion. One of the challenges we have is when we hear mental health, it covers everything, including the illnesses, but they're actually 2 different concepts. So according to the World Health Organization, because we use them for everything health, the definition of mental health is about coping with the normal stresses of life, accepting yourself, being able to adjust, and your overall well-being. Mental illnesses are disorders that affect our thinking or feeling or mood that comes with certain patterns of symptoms that others can see that we don't always recognize and are usually diagnosed. Mental wellness or well-being, people are using those because when you say mental health, people assume you mean mental illness, but it's really about health. So you can be mentally unhealthy. Let's say you're not managing your stresses, you're not coping with your problems, you're not sleeping well, but you don't have a mental illness because you're not diagnosed with anything. As opposed to somebody, for instance, who has signs and symptoms and now you have to get some assessment done by a mental health professional and you may say they have bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or something like that. So it's really two different concepts.
Thank you for sharing that. And I have so many questions, but let's talk a little bit about the mental illness a bit.
All right.
Because like you said, there are some obvious, signs, you have, especially when you go between Alpha Tree to Crossroads, I promise you, you will not see less than probably 10 madman on the road. And the funny thing is, you actually see far less madwoman on the road, not just overall,
True.
and you wonder, and I'm sure there are many things behind that, but mental illness, I believe, is so scorned by the whole culture, but I don't know if even as a church that I feel like we're as scornful. So you have worked in the psychiatric, I know you as a nurse, and that's kind of what your specialty. Tell us a little bit, just educate us a little bit on the mental illness aspect of it, and any suggestion before we jump into mental health itself.
So I'd say the first thing is we don't use mad because that's derogatory.
Thank you.
So they are mentally ill.
They are mentally ill.
Correct. They are living with a mental illness.
Wow.
The second thing is that not everybody on the road has a mental illness. Some are just homeless. The third thing is that the stigma around mental illness is really not just a local or international challenge.
Yes.
So once you say mental anything, people really have a challenge with it. So I worked at Bellevue for over 11 years.
Wow.
And the stigma is very real. People are abandoned. Or only mental health only hospital in the Caribbean. So what's
in
really
the Caribbean?
happening? Yes.
Oh, wow.
So while you have other hospitals who will have a mix of patients, Bellevue only has patients with mental illness.
Wow.
So when you come in, we have relatives who have abandoned their relatives who have gone because they can't manage. But then we always saying to them, when you leave them with us and we have like a whole ward of 25, for instance, then we have to manage. And some of them are now able to manage. And if they didn't tell you they have a mental illness, you would not know. But they don't have anywhere to go. So we have to manage that. So society on a whole, we are not as knowledgeable and we need to be more knowledgeable. But when you try to educate people, sometimes they're not trying to hear what you're saying. So I would say it's one of the things I've been trying to do, which is mental health education and promotion. So I do talk about health more, but the illness part we have to know. You have many different diagnoses. You have different signs and symptoms depending on what the diagnosis is. And we use local words here. So yes, I'm stressed out or I'm depressed. Depression is a clinical diagnosis. Nobody should never call it down on themselves. And when people behave in a certain way and you say, I'm bipolar, that's more with somebody who is like up this minute and sound happy and all right and then down the next. But you do not want to have bipolar disorder either, because there's one and there's two, and these are serious challenges. The main thing is for a lot of people is a lifetime of management. May include therapy and or medication and lifestyle changes, but the person has to be active in it. And then the family and the community needs to be in on it, because you don't want them to be going backwards and they're not getting the help.
Yeah.
But it's a lifetime change.
Wow. Chev, here's where I want to go, because I know you work with a lot of young people, and you would have started a conversation to say, you had some young people that were cutting themselves. And the question comes to mind is, young people going through stress? What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? They're not paying bills. What kind of stress they have? So I'd love for you to touch a little bit about, what are some of the stress that you think our young people have, and how any tips for even as parents or as, leaders in the church that can help our young people to manage their mental health.
Oh yes, Crystal, we have so many young persons who are really, really struggling. And the pandemic didn't make it easier. And the rise in social media has quadrupled, And so we find that we have a group of young persons who are really, really struggling big time with themselves. They're trying to discover who they are. But in trying to discover who they are looking to the wrong places to provide the answers. And so they're looking at social media, and they want to be as pretty as, they want to have the perfect life as, They want to be as beautiful as, and we could go on because of what is being projected on social media. And so we find that our young people are really struggling with a myriad of self-discovery issues, and even those in the church. And so I believe as the church looks on how to tackle this malady, that we're doing the right thing. I mean, shout out to you, you're having the conversations. And I find that there are churches who are now having that conversation and are trying to do the first thing and what I classify as the most important thing in tackling this issue, creating a safe space.
Yes.
So that space where young people can have that conversation.
Yes.
I am struggling.
Yes.
I am struggling. I don't think I'm pretty enough. I don't think I'm sexy enough. I don't think my parents are rich enough. I don't think I have a nice boyfriend, so I'm not popular enough. The church wants to create that space where they can come in and have that conversation without ridicule and judgment.
Yeah.
And so I think we are not there yet, but slowly. We're
and continuing this conversation is very helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So we are preparing to go on our first break, and I hope that you have been listening to the ladies as we talk about just educating. I think that's the purpose of this show this week, is to educate us, and hoping that it will give you, it will want you to know more. And Chev has a book that, talks a lot about the mental health, and, and Sheryl book is working on, right? I'm putting it on camera, right, Sheryl? Yes, right, to talk more. But we have seen the conversations, we have heard persons coming out and saying, how they're managing stress and how, their mental health, and we see it, and we will continue to advocate, because the more that we know is the more that we can help. So with that being said, we're going on our first break, and of course we will have the book of the week feature. Now remember, I want you to go on Amazon, Kindle, anywhere books are sold, to support the authors that are supporting the show. And of course at the end, we'll have some featured books, and we'll also have some businesses that are supporting us. So again, tune in here on MTM TV every Thursday for the DayeLight Show. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Principles, yes, that's right. On the straight and the narrow path, that's where we go. Welcome to the DayeLight Show. The DayeLight Show. Welcome to the DayeLight Show.
Welcome back to the second half of the DayeLight Show, and we're having a very needed discussion on mental health, mental illness, mental wellness. And again, our purpose for this episode is to educate. The word of God says that people perish because of lack of knowledge. And that's the purpose of DayeLight Show, as we mentioned. We want to educate you on knowing how to biblically and how to practically deal with all of these things. So we're going to have the conversation, Sheryl and Chev, to talk about how do you identify that you're in a negative mental health. So based on my understanding, you have this line, and then if you do math, you have 0, and then anything in a negative is bad, or go positive, and we want to have I'm guessing like a stable mental wellness,
Yes.
because stress must come. Death, somebody will die.
Definitely.
Depression will come, sadness may come, but we can handle it in a very balanced way, and that's the purpose of this conversation. So how do you identify when you're in the negative when it comes on to mental health?
All right, so if you're mentally unhealthy, there are a couple of things you will recognize. So we're clearing it that we're not talking about mental illness. If you're mentally unhealthy, all of us have mental health. We all have to work on keeping it. So we need to recognize, for instance, our response to things that are happening to us overwhelmingly can be, for instance, you're sleeping too much, or you're not sleeping at all, the hours are ticking away. We also find ourselves sometimes not eating, we've lost our appetite, or let's say we stress eat, and when we stress eat, nobody wants carrot sticks, we want chocolate and cheesecake. You may find yourself withdrawing from your friends and your family. The things that made you happy, you're not interested in doing them anymore. You may find yourself not taking care of your grooming and your daily needs because you maybe just don't want to be in the space. You may find work.
Like your heart ever broke, when that.
Yeah, man.
And you just lay down and you just eat the chocolate and you just.
Hey, I feel good at that.
You play the worst
One song over and
my heart, over. Mental problem that
Yeah, man. So it's not a thing that is not visible. So I would say to people, when you're eating that, but then you start finding yourself, let's say if it's work, you realize you're behind on your deadlines. If it's school, your schoolwork may be a little behind. What it really means is you need to find the right coping mechanisms that work for you. So we need a couple of realistic things, like self-care is something that we think about when you say self, it sounds selfish. No. There must be you time in every day.
Absolutely.
There must be a way for you to recognize the things that are a stressor to you and manage your stress. And yes, our young people have stress because they're young. They don't know the coping mechanisms yet. So everything look life and death, it's not life and death, but we need to help them to see that.
Anything you want to add, Chev?
Yes, I find that developing a coping mechanism is really, really integral as we look at mental health. And I think one of the things we need to encourage, we're not merely talking about youngsters, but our youngsters to do is to find an outlet, find a healthy outlet. For some it might be just being able to journal, I don't know if young people journal. I want to think that there are some who do. But journaling, writing out your feelings, finding somebody that you can trust. It might be a teacher, it might be your guidance counselor, it might be a mother figure, but just finding someone that you can speak to transparently, you don't have to hide, all covers are off, I can speak. And I believe those two are really, really important. And for the ones who are Christians, get some roots, be rooted in your life as a Christian, because the Bible itself is a coping mechanism.
I love what you said, because again, I do, and you guys can correct me, tell me, because there are times when it is like, oh, you just need to just go and pray, or you're not fasting enough, or you're not a Christian enough, or to some extent, you just need deliverance. The reason why you're sad is because you need deliverance, Shandai, Chode, olive oil, So I would love to hear what place does deliverance, the spiritual aspect, like where does it come in when it comes down to managing mental health, mental illness, etc.?
All right, so I would say, when you have a diagnosed mental illness, you're going to have a management regime. You may have therapy, you may have medication, you have to make lifestyle changes. These are things that others need to be aware of to help you and support you. If you're mentally unhealthy, it's the same thing. Now, it may sound like you're saying you're not Christian enough, because I was just laughing and I'm like, people say that.
Of course.
But the truth is, we're human beings who come with feelings. And let me tell you a little secret, feelings are very irrational. So when you're feeling down and depressed and sad, it's not logically calculating that you could be better if. It's you are the person who has to do the work. Spirituality is important. When we talk about mental health, there are different aspects to it, and spiritual health is one of those things. Not everybody is a Christian, but people are spiritual. So some of us, it's the grounding in our relationship with God. Because I tell people, and everybody who go to church are Christian, I'm just saying. But when you're grounded in your relationship, then you work on the praying and the studying and the fasting. But the truth is, bottom line, if you're only going praying, not going to take any action, it's not going to help either.
Absolutely.
And then the church needs to also be supportive, because one of the things I find is because a lot of the belief in the church is about the demons and the spiritual things that you're fighting against. They're not as proactive in the real world in terms of carrying it to get assessed, in terms of ensuring you take your medication, ensuring that you have a safe space here, and ensuring that people here can reach out to you in the last minute and they know that you'll be there to help them. Church has to do some of that. We have to have some more conversations like what you're saying. Because when I'm struggling, why should I be afraid to talk in the church if this is where my grounding is? And there are lots of people with mental illnesses or who are mentally unhealthy, who are suffering alone and can't talk in church.
Absolutely. Thoughts, Chev, on the whole demons is only reason why you're struggling with that. You remember Jesus and the I don't want to say, give me another, the mentally unhealthy man, you know, because he was crazy. And you know, Jesus was telling the demons to go, and every single mental illnesses because it's demonic, you know. What are your thoughts?
Here's the thing, Crystal, and one of the phrases I use very frequently is that life will life. Life is life in, which means that even though we are in the church, bad things will not just happen to those who are outside of the church, because life is life in. We'll face death. We'll have crises in our lives of different kinds. And so things will happen that will want to push us over the proverbial cliff. When we get to that point, what do we do? And so my thing is, the church needs to now start that conversation from the pulpit to the pew. So we need to start this whole mental health, mental illness, educating of the church. So when we have that person who is at the cliff, whose life is life in, the church is a reasonable alternative. The issue is that right now the church for some people is not. And might I say, not everything in the church is demonic. We need to move away from that. But the only way we can move away from that is when education takes the place of myths and misconceptions.
Correct.
And I love, thank you ladies for sharing. I love this conversation, because here's not what we're saying. We're not saying that demons are not real. Demonic oppression. We had Pastor David Grant that spoke about demonic oppression on, so we know that this is a real thing. What we're saying is that what James has said, when we lack wisdom, we should ask for it, and the Lord will give us bountifully. So with the power of the Holy Spirit, he'll be able to discern to say, and this is why, again, as a church body, we need to be educated with normal education, you know, like Sheryl, that is a psychiatrist, Chev is a mental health advocate. We have sex therapists. We have all of these things in the church where people are studying and learning things. And also we stay in our Bibles so that we are able to properly discern. And when the time comes, okay, you get medication, you get your deliverance, but you get your prayer too, and you get all of it. And it's not one or the other. And I think that's what we're trying to say.
Absolutely.
How is this conversation? I want somebody that's watching. I want you to ask yourself, you know, are you really well? Like really, really well? Or are we just pushing things on the rug because we don't want to feel embarrassed, we don't want to feel forsaken or rejected by others? And Chev said something, life is always life in, but I always add, God is always God in. You know, and he's in the business of, you know, just working miracles in our lives through people also. So as we are wrapping up, I can't believe time ended already. I want you guys to just kind of share with the viewers anything that's on your heart regarding the topic that I may not have mentioned, because I'm learning. You know, you are the experts. Anything that you want to share on the topic?
I would say we're using Google, for instance, for all these other things, but use it to also look at your mental health and well-being. Google a self-care quiz. Google a mental status quiz or mental health quiz. There are lots of them out there.
No, I want to pause quickly. We have 1 minute. But they said self-care is not biblical. Like, it's not, self-care is not biblical. Self-love, sorry, not self-care. Self-love is not biblical, and self-care is just something that we, so quickly, while you're doing that point, because you mentioned the self-care, I want to add it, because many people are thinking that,
Well,
anything self is not of
I would
God.
disagree with that. My favorite phrase about that is selfish is not always a bad word. That's when it's called self-care. And self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. So in order to be mentally healthy, you have to do some self-care. And in order to love other people as well as they deserve to be loved, you need to love yourself first. That's how you know how to give it and how to receive it. So Google that, get some quizzes, get them done. When you find out what's happening to you, then you need to also look at what you need to do. Find somebody out there who you can follow and or where you can get information.
Yes.
I am out there. My Instagram page is my Mental Health 101. Every month I do something about mental health specifically because everybody needs the information to know what to do when they need to do it. And I'm available to all and every church. I was at one yesterday. I do it regularly because we need the information.
Yes.
The knowledge is the power.
Yes. And Chev?
All right, so I just want to say that help is there. You do not have to struggle alone. You do not have to go over that proverbial cliff. There are books that are there, my own book, Struggles of the Mind, available on Amazon. You can follow me on my social media handles to get all the relevant information. Chevonette97, Chevonette James Henry. Go follow, go get the information. We are here for you. Churches, pastors who are listening, we stand ready to come in and educate your population, your congregants, so that we can begin to stem the rise of mental illness.
I love it. I love it. As I sit here, I think about just holistically when it comes down to the idea of success and living. I think we should continue to stress that all of it must be holistically. So we have spoken about financial health and financial education here on the show. We have spoken about mental, we've spoken about sex and marriages, relationship. We have, there's so many topics that we have covered. Politics, because again, even though we're a Christian, we are living in the world. And even though we are separated in terms of being holy and righteous, that's our calling as a believer, the reality is that we have to live in this world. And when we decide to holistically learn, be educated, be empowered, be inspired, that's when, as a believer, that we'll be able to have the real effect. The church is not as effective because we still only see things as spiritual only. Spiritual health is core, but so is the many other things that we will face in this life. Depression, stress, all of these things are real. So I want to thank you ladies again for coming on to the DayeLight Show. I have just been, just inspired all over again to just take this consideration, because sometimes you feel sad and, sometimes emotions and you're like, how do I manage this? How do I, get out of the rut? How do I, get out of that rut?
Accept it and process it.
Accept, process. Get help where needed. And that's what we're going to leave you with. So listen, we see the t-shirt, God and therapy.
Hi.
God and life coaching. God, but we love everything else, including our mental health, mental illness, managing that, and also mental well-being. That's it for this week's show. Yeah, we'll finish already. I'm so grateful for each of you. Listen, we have been getting feedback from this season. Persons are loving it, and I want to thank you for your support. As you look at the screen, we'll have some featured books, as we always have each week. We'll have some businesses that we're promoting also. So please go and support the businesses that are supporting us, the authors that are supporting us. Thank you to the NTM team for just doing this production. Shout out to all my makeup people, and I can't call out everybody, but I want to say thanks again for all my guests for season 3 so far, and we're looking forward to continue to just educate you and to inspire you with the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ, but most importantly to help you to navigate this life in a biblical, godly, purposeful way. God bless you.
everywhere we go. Welcome to the DayeLight Show.